Good evening, everyone. This is Mayor Shawyn Patterson Howard. Welcome to Sundays with Shawyn. We have a special guest tonight, Maureen Walker, who is the former Comptroller of Mount Vernon. She was Comptroller here for 25 years, who is a certified public accountant. And served the city of Mount Vernon very honorably. We have Ms. Walker here this evening because we want to talk about policies, procedures, and protocols surrounding financial management, the role of the comptroller, the role of the office of the mayor, the role of the city council, and definitely really focusing on the budget process and how city finances work. We're asking that you please take a moment to share this video. Please take a moment to share this live video with friends and family or start a watch party. We want to make sure that we have as many people tuned in because this is such a critical topic and there's been much conversation in our community about this. I'm going to bring in Ms. Walker right now so she could just introduce and share a little bit more about herself. But I want to be very clear. We invited Ms. Walker here as a guest tonight. She is not looking to run for city comptroller. She is quite happy, enjoying a very peaceful life with her family. But we thank you so much, former Comptroller Walker, for coming in and speaking with us and the community tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mayor Patterson. I'm happy to be here. Thank you to the viewers who are watching us. And let me just put for the record, okay? Good evening to you all. Good evening, Mount Vernon. Before I begin my presentation, I'd like to let my viewers know that I am now fully retired. I taught at both the graduate and undergraduate college level for over 20 years. But despite teaching opportunities in Georgia colleges, I am committed to enjoying my retirement. I now reside in Georgia, and I'm enjoying spending quality time with my husband of 45 years and my family. I've also rekindled friendships with many former Mount Vernon residents who now live in Georgia. And I'm very happy to continue being in touch with many of my friends who continue to reside in Mount Vernon. So on that note, I'm very happy to be here to see how much I can help.
All right. Well, thank you so much. So, Maureen, we want to really just start this evening out having the basic conversation about the budget process. As you know, in the city of Mount Vernon, the budget has not gone forward and been adopted on time in several years. Last year, we did not adopt the budget until the end of February. I took office in January. A budget had not been adopted in 2019 for the year of 2020. It was not adopted for 2019 until late in 2019, I believe at least February in 2019. So it's been a few years since the budget has been on time. And this year we were doing everything in our power to adopt a budget on time. I had asked my commissioners to have their budget projections to me by the end of August, which they did. We started to really look at the numbers and drill down into the numbers and see what was feasible. But one of the biggest challenges that we got on our end is getting actuals in revenue and expenditures from the comptroller, numbers that would really inform our budget development and numbers that we felt were accurate and that we could rely on in putting together an accurate budget document. We sent emails, we made calls for budget meetings and to sit down with the comptroller to no avail. In the end of September, we did receive some very initial numbers. Actually, the numbers were sent to us in October. We're given some initial numbers, but not numbers that would be really helpful to the budget development. So if you, as having served as comptroller for 24 years, can you talk to us about the budget process, the role of the mayor's office, the role of the city council, and most importantly, the role of the comptroller in the development of the budget?
Okay. When it comes to the budget preparation, It's never clear as to who's to navigate and who's to steer. You have the mayor's office, the controller's office, and the city council, right, who should work together in order to prepare a financially balanced budget. It starts with the controller's office. Throughout the year, the controller's office manages the budget of that year and of each department, just to ensure that spending does not exceed the budgeted amounts. And if spending does exceed the budgeted amounts, you have the option of transferring funds by legislation passed by the city council. As we all know, a budget is an estimate of revenues and expenses. So it's not set in stone, can be changed from time to time. So I made a couple of notes just to, walk you through in terms of every month what should happen. In August, beginning as early as August, the city charter mandates that the assessor's office provides the controller's office with the assessment valuation role. This assessment valuation is very key to the preparation of a budget. And it goes through the mayor's office. The assessor would give it to the mayor, and the mayor would send it to the controller's office. That's done as early as August. In September, all departments should begin to prepare their wish lists for the following year's budget. You can start earlier than September. The only downside to that is that you need to get the most recent actuals of expenditures and revenues. If started in September, departments will need to update their appropriation numbers. And when I say appropriations, I mean expenditures, in order to reflect actual numbers they would have received from the controller's office. Now, the controller's office is very, very key to this process because it's the financial documents that are prepared in that office. For example, revenues, estimated revenues, expenditures, and all the other things that go with preparing that document. That's done in the controller's office. On a monthly basis, the controller's office should issue a spreadsheet to the mayor's office and to the city council and to all the department heads. This is a document, a report that's generated by Munis. And this report should detail all the expenditures, what's budgeted, what's actually expended, what's left, what's over expended, and balances that are unexpended. That gives you a clear indication as to how much money you have left for the rest of the year. Now, Madam Controller, if I'm going too fast, let me know. Or if you need, additional clarification, just stop me and let me know. Okay?
No, I'm fine. I'm familiar with the process. I just want to make sure we have an experienced controller explaining the process to the people.
So on the basis of each department report, they can now begin to prepare their departmental wish lists for the new budget year. Once these requests have been fulfilled, a budget or budgets, and I say budgets, can now be developed. And the only reason I can say budgets is because sometimes the mayor prepares a budget, sometimes a controller prepares the budgets, right? And then you'll hear terms like the dueling budgets. You remember the dueling banjos in the movie Deliverance? Well, sometimes you get the dueling budgets. Apart from that, once the controller and the mayor have decided, okay, we need additional information to prepare the budget. In October, as early as October, the mayor and the controller will exchange requests letters for financial information pertaining to the budget. This is a letter that I would send, well, when I was controller, I would send to the mayor, and I'll tell you what are the components of that. And then the mayor would also send me a request letter requesting stuff. The controller will request from the mayor appropriations, which are the expenditures for each department. Remember, the mayor is the head of all the departments, except the controller's office. So the mayor will compile all those expenditure requests or the wish lists that may have been started sometime in August or September and forward that to the controller. The controller, the mayor in turn, will request from the controller to provide her or him things like estimated projected revenues, salary details for each department, state retirement system numbers, health and dental benefits, employee benefits, principal and interest on the debt that is owed by the city, contingent figures, social security expenses. Now, as you can see from the list, most of that information comes from the controller's office because that's the finance department. So the mayor is not in a position to complete a budget without that information. That's key. Those are key items that must be provided to the mayor. Once that has been provided, then there are other components such as, and I'll probably get to that, fund balance, which is, as you know, is a key component of the budget because that is available. If that's available, it allows the city to reduce any pending tax increases. Now that's October. So in November, what happens by the end of November, a budget should have been prepared. And it should have been presented to the Board of Estimate for a vote. In past years, it was always the week before Thanksgiving that budget was prepared. And that preparation comes after the mayor, the controller, and the president of the city council have sat down on several occasions. They've put their heads together and they have agreed on revenues and expenditures. Once that has been agreed upon, the mayor, the controller, and the city council president, they are the members of the Board of Estimate. Now you can have an annual estimate for the following year, which you can vote on at the Board of Estimate. Any two members of the three are needed to pass the budget. Only two members. It can either be the controller and the mayor. It can be the controller and the city council, or it can be the city council and the mayor. So any two of the three votes are needed to pass that budget. After that passage of the budget at the Board of Estimate meeting, a date and a time is then set for a public hearing. That public hearing can happen anytime after 3 days have elapsed after you voted at the Board of Estimate. We all know that at the public hearing, the Board of Estimate holds a public hearing. It's like a meeting of the Board of Estimate. We go there and we listen to the public. We take their input into consideration. And depending on what is said or what the issues are, or whether the public finds that the tax rate is too high, or they say that you have too many employees, etc., the Board of Estimate, the three members will go back to the drawing board. They can either decide we're changing the budget based on what has been said at the public hearing, or we will not change the budget. If we decide to change the budget and add, whatever alterations based on the hearing, that's it. We don't have to have another hearing by the public. The Board of Estimate will change, and they've agreed on that, and they've decided, okay, that's the final budget from the Board of Estimate. That budget is sent to the City Council now, so that they can determine when they would like to have their hearing. Once the City Council gets that budget, they can have a meeting, and then they will set the date for the public hearing, the City Council's public hearing. This is done in December, and normally, except I guess the last 3 years, this is done before Christmas. So at this point, the City Council can only, and once the City Council gets the budget from the Board of Estimate, it's very clear that people understand that they only have limited options. The City Council can only change expenditures. They cannot touch revenues. They cannot touch debt service. They cannot touch salaries. They can only cut expenditures. And those expenditures are not salaries that they can touch. So if they decide that they would like to amend salaries or amend revenues, that budget goes back to the Board of Estimate. The Board of Estimate is the only authority that can make changes to the full budget. If the City Council decides they're not going to touch anything, it goes to public hearing. They have their public hearing. Okay, they're satisfied with their public hearing. After all adjustments have been made by the Board of Estimate, then they can vote on the budget. That's the final vote that they will have. It doesn't go back to the Board of Estimate for a final vote. The City Council has that final vote. As I said before, if they would like to change anything in terms of expenditures, which are appropriations, they're free to do that. And then they can vote on the budget. It doesn't have to go back to the Board of Estimate. The only time it goes back to the Board of Estimate is if they intend to change or to ask for changes in revenues and in salaries. Once the City Council votes on that Board of Estimate, the Comptroller's Office now has the authority to begin preparing the tax bills to be mailed out to the homeowners and business owners. And that's basically the budget process in a snapshot. I haven't quite told you what are the components of the budget. What are the key components? But I guess later on we can talk about that.
Absolutely. Okay. So, one of the budget was not adopted until the end of February this year. And then COVID came about 2-3 weeks later and the city shut down. But we went through all of those processes, as you stated. We went through them as we were supposed to go through them. But unfortunately, the comptroller said it was the mayor's budget and no one else's budget. It was the mayor's budget. So traditionally, one of the biggest challenges we had this year was the adoption of salary resolutions. The salaries that were passed in the budget and voted on by the Board of Estimate, sent to the City Council and voted on, and that budget was adopted. The salary resolutions, to put those salaries into place and then to initiate step increases or anything that has been negotiated with the unions. In Mount Vernon, as you well know, we have the Police Benevolent Association, we have the Local Association of Firefighters, International Association of Firefighters, Local 107, we have Teamsters 456, and we have CSCA. And so, the overwhelming number of our employees here in the city of Mount Vernon are union. And so they have their contracts, which have expired several years ago, but based on their contracts, they still receive step increases and grade changes depending on what departments they're in. Who usually prepares those numbers for them to go into resolution to come to the Board of Estimate?
That's a financial document, and as such, step increases, as we know, step increases are increases defined in a resolution, as you said. It's prepared by the Comptroller's Office. And then it's passed on to the City Council and the Board of Estimate for a year on a yearly basis for a vote. But the numbers are prepared in the Comptroller's Office. The Chief Accountant, the Comptroller, and with input from the Payroll Department, we would go over step increases. The Chief Accountant is key in this process. And then he would have me review it, okay, second eyes, and we'll go through it thoroughly. Once that is done, we ask for assistance from the Law Department, who would type the resolution. Once that resolution is typed, it comes back to the Comptroller's Office. We again review it. Then once we're satisfied with that, it is sent to the City Council for adoption. Once it goes to the City Council for adoption, then it goes to the Board of Estimate for adoption. The step increases resolution includes, as you said before, all the union contracts. It also includes Water Department, the Water Department members, and CSCA 456, local fire, police. Okay, all those departments are in that, but it's done by the Comptroller's Office.
So one of the challenges that we had this year is that Comptroller Reynolds refused to perform this function. Her office, the chief accountant, the payroll department, they absolutely refused to perform this process. And so the development of these numbers was pushed back on my office. And of course, my chief of staff, Darren Morton, if you can send him in now, Chief Morton, in conjunction with our HR department, Ms. Holly, they really dug in and worked through those numbers. And of course, they went back to each of the departments. Now, that was a painstaking process. It took a lot of time. It took a lot of research. And it probably would have taken, 10% of the effort that the administrative staff had to put in it for the Comptroller's Office, for the finance office to perform that function. That is where payroll is done. That's where these numbers are kept. And they have all of the calculations and the formulas. Right. It would have been much easier, much more efficient.
I agree with you with that.
But it did not happen in that place. And that is one of the challenges. And so when it came to our police department, as well as our fire department, it took months for them to receive some of their step increases from step 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 or 4 to 5. And definitely steps 4 to 5 are very significant. For some people, and their step increases were supposed to come last October, before I took office in October of 2019. So this was even before I became mayor. Many of our police officers and our firefighters did not receive their step increases that were from their contracts. Some of them, it took up to 10 months for them to get. Now, again, that was pre-Shawyn Patterson Howard administration, and that is a function that is supposed to happen out of the Comptroller's Office. That caused a lot of a great decrease in morale from police and fire. And then the CSCA and Teamsters 456, they still have not received their step increases. We did those numbers. She also pushed those numbers back for the administration to do. And so the morale of the staff has been challenged because there's a difference between people being greedy and people asking for what has been negotiated and what they deserve when they come to work every day and do their job. So yes, Jen Master Giorgio, like she said, she's in 456 of CSCA, has not received their step increase. And we're at the end of the year. So that's one of the challenges that we have, yet people show up every day. There are also departments that have not received their overtime. And in this last check, they just received their holiday pay. But yet, the Mount Vernon staff continue to show up day to day. There are many challenges. There are many challenges. You know, we have a lot of capital needs in the city, and capital needs have not been budgeted for years because there had not been a capital project board since 2010. So the physical conditions that our staff come to work in are difficult. Not receiving your pay and your step increases is a challenge. Not having a contract is a challenge. And these things existed before I got there, and they continue to persist even now. But we're really trying to work through it.
The step increases are always prepared, as I said, in the controller's office. And any document that has numbers and financial information, always prepared in the controller's office. You know, as I always say, the quickest way to lose power is to give up power. And when you're not going to prepare those documents, right, it's the quickest way to give up your power. You know, when we talk about capital projects, I think you mentioned that there hasn't been a capital project board since 2010. But if I can remember, we have purchased capital equipment since then. Because once you have the ability to go out and bond, okay, any department that requests capital items, we can go out and do a short, a bond and get that money, sell that bond to get the capital equipment. So that's enough. But I don't think the city's in a position right now, from what I've heard and what I've read, that they can go out and bond because you guys have no financials. And you cannot bond without financials.
What was our bond rating when you were the controller?
The last time when I left, I believe off the top of my head, it was an A2.
Okay, so a double A.
We've had pretty good bond ratings. We have, because we've been very fiscally conservative when I was there, in terms of how we spend money, in terms of what we bonded for, in terms of getting grants to buy equipment. And the planning department was very instrumental in helping us to get funding for some equipment. And even the police and fire on their own were very instrumental in getting funding to buy pieces of equipment.
Yes, so we've worked very closely this year and the end of last year with the Urban Renewal Agency, which has been able to utilize some of the federal HUD funds to go out and make purchases for fire trucks. Unfortunately, this is money, again, we almost lost because for the past, I'd say probably since February of 2019, since February of 2019, the comptroller has sent several $1 million of funding back to HUD that's been transferred from HUD and been approved by HUD, sent to the city of Mount Vernon through wire transfer, as you well know. But the comptroller has sent that money back to the federal government.
That's unheard of in my time. We would never send money back, never. We were always looking to see how much more we can get.
Exactly. I mean, this is money, we as residents pay federal taxes, and HUD is just one of the ways some of those federal tax dollars that we send to Washington comes back. They're not giving us anything that we didn't send to them in the first place. And you definitely don't want to send that money back.
And then you've got to be careful if you don't spend it within a certain period of time, you cannot access it after that.
I mean, the HUD standard through the Urban Renewal Agency is once the money is received by the city, it's transferred over to the Urban Renewal Agency. Within 72 hours. Within 72 business hours. Now, there's monies that have been down in the finance department going back to 2019.
Wow.
That have not been transferred. Over to Urban Renewal. We owe our vendors hundreds of thousands of dollars. And, some of this money is for rent for people who are homeless, veterans, have HIV/AIDS, health issues and challenges, mental health services, job training services, domestic violence services, prison reentry services, food programs,
Mm-hmm.
college scholarships. These are the types of monies
Wow.
that are being sent back to the federal government that have been allocated to the city of Mount Vernon. And right now, we've been having a challenge receiving into the city the COVID monies that the federal government has allocated for Mount Vernon, several $1,000,000 that will help with eviction prevention, homeless outreach, purchase of ambulances, help to small businesses. So these are some of the things that we're dealing
So
with.
has that money started to flow to the city as yet?
Well, we unfortunately, back on January 17th, the comptroller wrote a letter to HUD stating that she did not want HUD to send money through her office to the city of Mount Vernon, and they had to create another way. As you know, the Urban Renewal Agency for entitlement monies cannot be the recipient, only for competitive monies. So we rearranged
Right.
some of the grants to come directly to the Urban Renewal Agency. But there are other entitlement funds that must come to an account that has the city's
City's tax
employee
ID.
identification number, the tax ID, as well as the city's DUNS number. So through legislation and in partnership with our city council, and legislation was passed there. Legislation was passed at the Board of Estimate to open up an escrow account through the city clerk's office
Okay.
to receive these monies to come into the city, so that our residents and our businesses who are hurting terribly could
Have access.
experience the benefit of these federal funds. Unfortunately, last Thursday, the comptroller went to the bank and is trying to interrupt those funds and get that account closed. So she's asked for monies not to come through her office. She's asked for us to receipt these monies a different way where her office is not involved. We did that through the proper legislation, everything being very transparent, being done properly and in the public eye. The federal government has approved this account. And we have started receiving some of the monies through it, but the comptroller on her own went to the bank and tried to gain access to the account so that she could stop the funds from flowing through that. We have our incredible Chief of Staff, Dr. Darren Morton, here on the line right now, and in our conversation, and I'm going to bring him in a second. But one of the things that we want to talk about is what is the process for closing the books at the end of the year, and why is it very important to close the books annually, even if you haven't been, you close the books before an audit, but what is the process of closing the books, and why is closing the books so important?
Okay. By the end of the year, because you've been given a budget to use in terms of your expenditures, in terms of how much revenue is going to come into the city. From an auditing point of view, at the end of the year, the controller's office, the chief accountants, the accountants, myself, we would sit down, and there are certain journal entries that must be done. Now, I'm going to be talking from as though I'm teaching the class, because that's what I'm used to. So bear with me. So we do many journal entries in order to close, for lack of a better word, close the books. Because you want to know, and the auditors would like to know, this was the money that was budgeted, this is how it was spent, this is how much was spent, what was left over. Now, when we have the report from Munis, every month you have that report that's supposed to go to the department heads and to the mayor's office and to the city council. You should see in your lines what was budgeted, what was spent, if you have any overages, I said if you overspent, or if you underspent in that particular line. At the end of the year, we would ask the controller's office, will ask the city council to do a transfer of all items that were underspent to items that were overspent. Because that report needs to be equal. You don't need that report to say, well, you overspent $50,000 here, and in another line, you haven't spent anything. We'd like to take what was in the line where you have money left and put it in the line where you where you didn't have enough money to spend. So it evens up. That needs to be done. The city council needs to vote on that, pass legislation to adopt that. So that when the auditors come, we've done all our journal entries, we've booked all our items for, let's say this is 2021 we're going into. We have booked all our items to 2020. Okay, we've paid all our accounts. At the beginning of 2021, we're going to cut off spending from the departments in February of 2021. Actually, we're saying to them, all the expenses you had for 2020, if you haven't gotten those invoices, if you haven't paid those invoices, if you haven't gotten those bills, please make sure the vendors send them in, because we would like those bills paid against 2020's budget. This happens like early 2021. So at the end of February or even early March, we say there's a cutoff line, guys. Any bills that haven't come in from any vendors will be paid against 2021's budget. It's important for us to do that because the auditors are coming in. We have to prepare the books for the auditors. Auditors, your external auditors, don't prepare your books for you. You have to prepare the books and have them ready so that the auditors now can go and review the financial status and all the accounts in the city of Mount Vernon or in any city. And so when they do that, then they sit with the controller's office and they do testing on certain items in certain departments. They may choose to do a testing of whether the money was spent correctly. External auditors are not looking for fraud. That's not their job. They are looking to make sure that those financial statements are presented in a fair condition. And the city has actually done what it's supposed to do according to the charter and according to the budget. That's why we talk about closing the books, cutting off at that point in time, probably in February or March, all items that are going to be levied against the 2020 budget in 2021. So that in 2021, let's say in April, May, if a bill comes that should have been paid in 2020, okay, it has to be paid in 2021 now because the books are closed.
Right.
So, it's like saying, well, it's when it's incurred, when the bill was incurred, you pay it against that period. It's not when you paid, but when it was incurred. If it was an expense that came in 2020, it needs to go against 2020's budget. That's why we have that cutoff.
Thank you so much. I mean, I'm enjoying this. I, as someone who has my master's in public administration and who served as an executive director and a CEO, and as a program director for 25 years, I've had to manage budgets. I've had to do journal entries. I've had to do bank reconciliations. These are things that you do as part of your executive role. I've never been the comptroller, but I have had to manage and lead audits for the companies that I ran or the programs that I ran. And so I'm very familiar with this. One of the challenges we have, and Dr. Morton, you can chime in, is we will bring, and for the past few years, bills will be brought to the comptroller's office, and the comptroller's office will reject the bills and will not accept the bills, and therefore will not pay the bills. And so we here are dealing with bills from 2018 that we're still trying to get paid that have been submitted over and over again. We have bills that we've submitted back in January and February that now still in December have not been paid or the comptroller refuses to accept them. And if she doesn't stamp them into her office, then, she decides she doesn't have to pay these bills, or that we've been derelict in our duties on this end. So one of the things that we're constantly seeing and that she's saying is you don't have money left in your line. I mean, back in March, she was telling us in DPW that there was monies that we did not have available in a line. And I'm saying, but we just passed the budget a month ago. We did not expend all of the monies in that line in a month. So one of the big questions that we have, since the comptroller has not closed the books from 2017, 18, and 19, is how much of the 2020 budget has she used to go back and pay old bills? This is a report that we received. She actually sent it through her attorneys to our attorneys. It's not something she ever gave directly to us. But it says, if you could see at the top, fiscal year January 1st, 20 to December 31st, 20. And that's for this year. Now, if we go down, Malcolm, if you go all the way down to W, there's a company here called Wilson and Chan, which is an external attorney that the city has used in times past. We have not used Wilson and Chan for 2020. So it says Wilson and Chan, they're in New York, New York. And if you could slide over, Malcolm, it says 0. So it'll say year-to-date purchases, 0. We've made no purchases from them. But this number here, $237,608.89, is the amount of money that the comptroller has paid them year to date. Now she is paying these expenses against the 2020 budget. That's the only way that it's going to show up in a 2020 report. So if you see here, it says year-to-date purchases, let's just say for everyone, is $58,437,748.08. Year-to-date payments, $64,233,625.93. That right there is an accounting no-no. Usually you would see year-to-date payments being less than year-to-date purchases, because that means that we have accounts payables. We might have purchased something, but we haven't paid all of our bills yet. This report, sent from the comptroller, generated by Jennifer Castro out of her office, says that we've made $58 million in purchases, but we've paid $64 million in bills out of the 2020 budget. This is fiscally impossible.
Well, you can see one of the reasons is that $237,000 that was paid, right? It's paid against the 2020 budget.
Right.
And the reason could be that the bill might have come in 2020 when the services were performed in 2019. It could have come in later. So they paid it.
The interesting thing here is Wilson and Chan is an external lawyer. And those bills have to be approved by our corporation counsel's office.
Correct.
And our corporation counsel has not approved any bills to be paid to this vendor. He's asked for details from the beginning of the year on what expenditures were for, and directed the comptroller not to pay these bills since he didn't know what they were for. But yet we have incurred expenses during 2020 for external attorneys, like our labor law attorneys, that she has refused to pay. So she's refusing to pay the bills from 2020 that we know what they are and we've asked her to pay, but yet bills that we don't know what they're for and what services were performed, she's paying, and she's using and taking it out of the 2020 budget. But then also, these are things she should be taking out of 2019, especially since she didn't close the books, and she claims that she had excess monies in 2019.
Well, do you know that the books haven't been closed? Do you know that? Or we're just assuming that the books haven't been closed? I don't know.
We've seen no
Well,
evidence of.
Okay.
I think that that's part of, so that may be a question that we've all been asking, right? Which
Mhm.
is, and I would love to have your insight on what is the process, right, for closing the books, because we've not experienced that or had any indication
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
the books are closed. I think
Mhm.
what so what we're hearing, what you're hearing from the mayor is that we are really trying to figure out exactly what is the financial status really of the city, what has been paid that is genuinely 2020, and what has been paid that is in 2020 that is really 19 or 18.
Mhm.
And when did the books get closed? And where's the report kind of to demonstrate that, right?
Mhm.
None of that which we have. So part of the challenge has been that the commissioners have been requesting for detailed information from the comptroller's office, which you have articulated, that typically comes with a detailed report of what
Mhm.
had been paid out of each one of those lines, which they have not received. What they've received is a reporting that says that the amount that had been paid out from that line
Mhm.
and what's available. But as for who's been paid and how much of it that was, so that they could then compare that with what their submissions have been to the comptroller's office for this fiscal year, they have not received. So,
So
so
one
that's what
second,
we need to
Chief.
know. Right.
We're going to
Right.
have Malcolm load that up. So
Right.
we'll be able to talk, but we want you to load that up, Malcolm.
Yeah.
Like when I was a commissioner, back in 2016, I received detailed reports from the comptroller's office at that
Mhm.
time, letting me know what was budgeted in that line, what we spent, how much we had left, and if we'd overspent, that we needed to transfer monies from other
Correct.
lines.
Correct.
Malcolm, can you pull the reports up that we've
So wait,
been
so
getting?
just wait a minute before he does that. That's a quick question. So what typically is the process for closing the books?
Well, the process is making sure that the controller's office does all the looks at the year end balances, make sure that she asks for a transfer of funds that are under expended to funds to lines that are over expended. So as I said, you have that even up of accounts. All the accounts are not in negatives, but they're all in positive numbers,
Mhm.
right? And then they will do journal entries if the chief accountants or the senior accountants would do journal entries to correct things or to correct items that were incorrectly booked during the year. Let's, for example, say that that particular line item that has $234,000 that should not have been in 2020, but should have been in 2019, right? They will correct that by doing a reversing entry, okay, a journal entry to put it in its right place.
Right. Right.
That's part of closing the books.
But typically that would then be require I guess, a referral letter from the comptroller's office to the city council to make those transfers, and then
Yes,
the
it
board of
does.
estimates to approve that, right?
Yes,
And so that's
the
why I
city
think that,
council has to approve the transfers.
okay, right.
And
Which
without
that is
approving
okay.
those transfers, you can't close the books
No,
because you
well,
haven't balanced them out.
you can kind of close the books without the transfer. It's just that it's going to look ugly from an auditor's point of view. Nobody wants to see negative numbers. All right, you want to see everything evened up, because if you have funds in one line and you haven't used it, and you don't have funds in another line, the cleanest way is to transfer. And that's why sometimes, if the city council didn't want to do it, we would make sure that the auditors urge them to pass that transfer.
Okay.
Okay. So Malcolm, if you could share some of the reports that we've gotten that we've challenged, and you can take us off screen. We want the people to be able to see. So like you'll see the mayor's office, okay, as of August 18th, 2020, I had 10,000 zero used, 5,269 used with $9,731 balance. I mean, the controller constantly speaks about the fact that we're just spending and running through money, but you can see that we've really underspent. The law department, you know, you're saying that these numbers, we can't be very clear. I'm sorry if I'm stuttering, but it's just so hard when you're looking at a report and you know what a financial report, it says department, account code. It should have the name of the account. You can go back up or stay there, Malcolm. How much, it should have a column that says how much was budgeted, then
That's
the amount
correct.
used, and then the amount available. It
Correct.
doesn't even show how much was budgeted. So oftentimes that means that you're not even putting the budget into the computer so that when you charge things against it, you can have an accurate accounting.
Correct.
So this report by itself is deficient because it doesn't have enough information. It should have far more information. And so when Malcolm, slow down. So when you go in, and this is the police department, every time the police try to spend money, you see all of this money available. These are based on reports that she gives us.
Now,
We've said,
the report is clearly lacking the budgeted amounts, and it's clearly lacking the code the code description.
those minimum, there should be another 2 columns in here. But say there's a number that we don't agree with. We'll say, Madam Comptroller, you say we've spent 20,000. We say we've spent 15,000. Can you please give us details so that we can reconcile our numbers with yours and determine why your number is different than ours? She refused to give us any information greater than this. And if you're using Munis, which is the government version of QuickBooks, to input every bit of revenue sent in, every expense, every vendor, every check cut, it's just a matter of putting in dates and running a report. It's very simple. It takes no time or energy, but we cannot get this level of detail from her so we can know why her expenditures are so beyond our expenditures.
Which means it could be that Munis is not used to generate that this report. This is not a Munis generated report.
No, it's not. And Malcolm, if you can just go down further. So all year, and especially during budgeting time, we've been asking for, you could stay right there, Malcolm. We've been asking for, please give us estimated revenues, estimated expenditures, so that we can prepare the budget, so we can understand what we've spent, what's been taken in, and how we're going to prepare our budget for next year. So September 28th, 2020, this report is generated from the controller's office and sent to us. Now, if you look at the second line on here, it says report year 2019 revenues. These are revenues. So in October, she sends us a report that tells us how much money came in 2019. That doesn't help us in 2020, in 2020. That was one of our biggest challenges. We have not received a report on revenues from 2020 to date. She continues to say that revenues are down in the city of Mount Vernon, but she has not provided us with a revenue report. Malcolm, if you can go down to expenditures. So here in the same report, dated the same day, report year January through September 2020, she's providing us with expenses. And Malcolm, if you can go all the way down to the bottom. And Chief, you can chime in at any time. Is there a final number on here? No. So she didn't calculate that. So, these are the numbers that she provided us with. Again, it was
Right.
not
There was
necessary.
no right. There was no total down at the bottom. However, once again, I mean, what we did is we basically extracted that out of a PDF, painstakingly, once again, in order. And again, I'll say this, my role as the chief of staff is to try to support the mayor to move the thing forward and try to get us to a place where we can do what is necessary for the people of Mount Vernon. And so in doing that, we've spent, some hours. Malcolm, myself, the mayor herself, and some other key, administrators from offices that have a financial background and understanding to pull this information out of this PDF form, and to go through it line by line and to look to make sure that we had all of the accurate information as reported from this document that the comptroller provided. And once we did all of that and went back and, triple checked it. And again, of course, there's always a human error, but we've done it so much now. We basically then went and totaled all of the expenses as of August. And when we finally calculate all of that, it amounts to that as of that September date, that we would have spent about 66% of what was budgeted. Now we recognize that by that time, if you're on mark for the budget, then it would suggest that you have spent 75%, right? Plus 9 months. So, from a theoretical perspective, or on the face of it, we're actually about 9% below the budget. Now, what we do know is that there's an anomaly, right, this year because of COVID. So so some of the revenues have been affected, which is why it is crucially important for us to be able to make sure that we're getting the 2020 revenues in order to kind of compare them against that, right? And so, so based upon the documents that we received from the comptroller's office, we would have spent about 78 million, of the budget, 78.3 million. The projected amount that for 75% of that would have been 87.8 million. On it. And so, basically what we're doing is trying to go through it piece by piece to make sure that we have the accurate information in order to be able to try to prepare a budget. But this is the kind of information that we're receiving. And so therefore it's somewhat of a shot in the dark,
In order for you to do a budget, your revenues, you must know year-to-date revenues that you've received. You've got to see 2009. You've got to see 2019 budgeted revenues and what was collected, the actual. You've got to see 2020 budgeted revenues and what you have, the actuals to date, in order for you to go forward to do an estimate for 2021. If you don't have those actuals, it's extremely difficult because you don't know where your revenue shortfalls are if you don't see the actuals.
And so,
that, Maureen, we haven't sitting on our hands, right? I think some of the commentary is that the administration is just sitting, on their hands on this. So what we did do is, the mayor asked that we have every department head to give us what they have in their office, right, as it pertains to the revenues, right, and give us all of what they have as their expenditures of the state. We started to kind of put that into this spreadsheet so that we could do comparative analysis, right? But I was a commissioner with you as the comptroller, and you would always say, listen, that's fine, but the department budgets are not the official records of the city, right? And so therefore, we can do that, but we know that there are some potential gaps that are there. And then when we look at it, we realize that there are some expenditures, some vouchers that have been submitted by the department heads that had not been
Great.
paid up to September that may have been lagging, right? So again, that is probably the case again now in December. You know?
Right.
So if I can just, because I just want to go back to these numbers from January to September, the end of September, actual expenses, $78,371,181.93. What was budgeted was $87,855,658.50 for a savings, not an overspending, but a savings of $9,484,476.57. So the percentage of the budget spent year to date at the
67.
end of September means we're 3/4 of the way through the year, which meant our spending should be about 75% of the budget for the year. We are 9% under budget. We're 8% under budget, which comes to $9.5 million almost. The comptroller continues to say that we've overspent our money. We've overspent. We hired 26 people. We've just blown all of the city's money. We've actually saved money. These are the comptroller's numbers. These are the first numbers that we've been able to get from her. And based on her numbers and her numbers alone,
you're underspent.
It paints a different story than what she's telling us. We have tried to submit all of our bills. Now, what I'm really afraid to see is the revenue numbers. We have brought checks down to the comptroller's office for months. The building department, the fire department brought down tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of checks. The comptroller has held on to checks for 6, 7, 8 months until they're stale. Stale means you can no longer deposit them. Anyone who has a check that they haven't deposited, after a while, you can't deposit. She will then turn and send those checks back to the departments and tell them to try and go after the money again. Now, if you've already provided someone a permit and you come back to them 8, 9 months later and ask them for a payment, that's going to be very hard to get. So we could even say, this is the amount of money we've turned over to her, but we have no idea on what she has deposited. Another challenge with the revenues, the police department, the city court have struggled to bring monies over to her. Cash, check, to give her these deposits, and she's refused them. She hasn't taken them in at all. Not even, she hasn't taken them in, so it's not like she can send them back. She hasn't received and receipted these monies, so they have monies that are sitting to be given to her that she's refused to date and therefore has not deposited. We have the school district, we have private residents, we have businesses who have been trying to pay their property taxes for months. She has turned their money away. She has refused their monies. We're talking about millions of dollars, but yet she sends my office and the city council letters saying that the tax collections are down. Well, tax collections and revenue collections are going to be down. A, if you refuse to accept the payments. B, revenue collections are going to be down if you receipt money into your office and you refuse to deposit it. You wait 6 months, 7 months. There were checks that she sent back to the building department in May, monies that had been collected in 2019, again, before I became mayor. So these are not practices that begun. These are not things that she was doing just when I got into office. These are practices that she's had over at least the past year, even before I got here. So these are some of the very, very, very real challenges. It reminds me very much of kind of Trump, where you create a crisis And you create a crisis, and then you can't solve the crisis that you've created. So when she talks about narratives, the narrative of the fact that you've accepted checks, your office has stamped the back of these checks for deposit, but then gives them back to our offices 6 months later, that's unheard of. That the school district has a check for what, 400,000 plus for her that she's refused to give to them. Maureen, in the 24 years that you were comptroller, did the school district ever threaten to take over the collection of the school taxes?
Never,
We have
never.
lost, they
They
have
were
now,
so happy that we were collecting the taxes for them.
because the school district is not looking to collect taxes,
Correct.
but because of her failure to transfer tens of millions of dollars in a timely fashion to the school district, they experienced cash flow problems. They couldn't spend, they couldn't do the business of the school district because their revenue, their main source of revenue, was tax collections that were collected here. So now the school district has taken over tax collections for themselves. This is unheard of. This is unheard of. I want to show you another report. It's called our cash balance, our estimate of. Can you put that report up, Malcolm? If you could just expand it some.
Expand that.
So again, this comes from the comptroller. This is
That's the trial balance.
This is the trial balance sheet. So if you look at the top and you look all the way to the left, it'll say cash, 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 all the way to the left. So you'll see it says cash, net payroll, $18 million negative balance in the bank, APs, negative $19 million, money market account, negative $14 million. If you go down a little bit, where's that negative $26 million? That's taxes, negative 26 million. If you go down to taxes received current, negative 53 million. Taxes received current, negative 19 million. So, I mean, everything in here says that every one of our bank accounts are negative. I mean, negative by hundreds of millions of dollars. But this is what tickles me and makes me terrorized and just shows the level of incompetence of our comptroller's office. Then it says fund balance. Can you show that, Malcolm? Fund balance. These are numbers that come from the comptroller's office. Fund balance. Positive $71,693,287.80. The fund balance we have, if we have $71 million, almost $72 million in our
Go over to the ending line.
go over to the ending, $71 million in our fund balance.
If you have $71 million in your fund balance, you have no problem. There should be zero tax increases for the next 5 or 6 years. If you have that type of money.
Or longer than that, we should be able to repair our firehouses. We should be able to repair the Dole Center, the armory. We should be able to fix up the police department so that they have a real firing range in the back.
And the only way I can see that is fund balance is very, very tricky. Fund balance has several levels to it. You have things that are like unassigned and assigned and restricted amounts, okay? But I've never seen a fund balance with that amount of money. That blows my mind right now.
And you're a CPA, which you're a certified public accountant?
I'm a certified public accountant for the last over 30 years.
And you teach accounting
and I teach accounting
and graduate level?
Correct. And I've taught these things, you know. So to have that type of fund balance, it could be that it's a portion of what's restricted for certain items, what's unrestricted, and in terms of restricted, it's assigned for funds that may not be spent because they are assigned for expenses, certain things to happen in the future. For example, in your fund balance, you should have assigned fund balance to pay contractual labor if you have negotiated your contracts, and for things like public safety expenses, right? You can have a huge number there, but not to that extent at all.
What is the largest fund balance that you can remember in 24 years of being the comptroller?
Let me see. I think I may have that somewhere. I know my last fund balance may have been like 19 million when I left in 2017. At the end of 17, we hadn't completed the 2016's report. But the 2015 fund balance was about 19 million. Yeah, it was about that. Yeah, I'm right. 2015 was 19 million. 14 was 11, 13 was 9. Total fund balance. So
for the fund balance,
10 to 1 blows my mind. I don't know where a number like that would come from.
so I mean, there would be no reason for not having contracts for police, fire, Teamsters, and CSEA. I mean, the bottom line is we know that that number is inaccurate, just like it's inaccurate that we
When
have.
I left office in 2017, at the end of 2017, I had worked with the unions and we had already settled the contracts with the unions. Fire, it wasn't police, I think it was just fire and CSEA. Those contracts were settled. It was left for the mayor who was in office to sign off on those contracts. Never did. But we had already negotiated those contracts. At the end of 17, going into 18, they were never signed off on. And so now those guys are without contracts. Nothing has been negotiated since then.
So
that was unfortunate.
You know, we've seen a large exodus in this past year, and of course in years past, of people in the police department transferring. We've had probably about 15 in the month of December. But no contract for 2018, 2019, 2020, and who knows what we can do in the foreseeable future. Because we have no information to even bargain and have that conversation with them. 1 minute I said to the comptroller, I said, well, you know, you said we're broke. And she said, well, who said that? And then the next week she turns around and says that we've spent all of the money and she's operating the city on fumes. And that's why people haven't been paid overtime. So Maureen, one of the biggest challenges that we had in 2019, the comptroller refused at that time, interim mayor, Andre Wallace, did not allow him to hire 11 firefighters, to send those firefighters through the academy. We know the academy is about 18 weeks, so those firefighters were supposed to go in November. They would have probably graduated in about February and been on the streets in March. We had 18 vacancies. We had 18 vacancies coming into 2020. And so the overtime, you know, when you have 18 vacancies, you have to
incur overtime.
You have to incur overtime. You're forced to incur overtime because there are minimum staffing levels that you can have. And so, you know, one of the things she says is that we've blown out our overtime in fire, that we've blown out our overtime in DPW. DPW, we've had over 20 vacancies for the entire year. So just a few months ago, we were able to transfer about $992,000 out of DPW salaries into an overtime line and into a line to purchase some snow equipment. As our Commissioner Bush had laid out a snow emergency operations plan. But she has refused to pay the overtime. She has refused to purchase the equipment. And so we continue to work without a proper complement of staff. Our DPW workers are tired and they're not being paid their overtime, and they don't have the equipment that they need to do the job that they need to. They can, I mean, I have to give them a lot of credit. They continue to pull together and weld together broken machines and go out there and get the job done as best as possible, but they're not being paid their overtime. This is a real challenge. And so, as you said, when there are monies that are saved in lines and overspent in other lines, you
Right.
transfer those
Transfer
monies.
those monies, yeah.
As we showed here, as of the end of September, we had over $909.5 million in savings just through that time. And if we continue to save at that rate at the end of the year, we should have like another $4 million. So if we saved 9 million over the first 3 quarters, we should save about 3.5 to 4 million over the last quarter, meaning that we should end the year with about a $13 million savings, and not overspending. She talks about some of the positions that were added in the budget that she worked with me on in the beginning of the year, and then she abandoned when she realized she couldn't get a raise. We, yes, had in a 5th corporation council that year to date we haven't hired. We had in there a paralegal. Year to date, that position has not been hired. We had a DPW watch person in there, position never hired. Motor equipment operators, those positions were not hired. An assistant director for our disabled program at Rose Simon, that position not hired. We had 3 positions available in buildings for code enforcement officers. Those positions sorely needed, all of them very much needed, never hired. We put in the budget the monies which had not been budgeted for our match to the county's nutrition grant that they give us of $275,000. That's match monies for monies that we receive. That's not monies that we weren't spending prior. It was monies that had not been budgeted and shown in the budget for the past few years, but were being expended. We put in for a director of neighborhood facilities. We didn't hire that person. We changed the position over to support Shane, who's been our social responsibility director for the city and taking care of and doing all of the feeding programs and the extra outreach that we've had to do for our community since COVID. I think that money, we saved a half of year on that. We didn't hire a youth director in recreation. We didn't hire a planning commissioner. Our chief of staff is the planning commissioner until March. We're short a planning commissioner. We're short our planning administrator. We're short our senior planner. We didn't hire another person, a senior clerk or the clerk, the head clerk in the city council office. So we have so many positions that are vacant, and that's why you're seeing such a great savings.
And
but
those
because
positions were budgeted?
those positions were all budgeted.
Okay.
And even, one of the things that she says is, oh, we gave a huge raise. We gave a huge raise to someone. Yes, Maureen, one of the areas that has been weakest in our city for the last 20 years has probably been management services, insofar as having someone to lead the IT department. And so for the first time ever, I think we've hired someone who is an expert in IT, because the budget doesn't have to come out of management services. That's something that the chief and I and different ones in the different departments have been working on, the finances. And so we decided infrastructure, the IT infrastructure of the city, was one of the most important things that we needed to catch up on and take care of. And with COVID and everything being done remotely, we have to take care of our IT infrastructure. Our servers are 20 to 25 years old. 20 to 25 years old. No one has a computer in their house that's 20 to 25 years old. That, no one's using that. And that's what the city is running on. The IT director, who'd been here for 34 years since he was a college student, Joe, he retired back in May in the height of COVID. And so without having Joe there and not having an IT director, we went out. We hired an incredible IT commissioner. Her name is Dr. Helen Uzmari. And the salary was so low that we had to increase it. It was 115. We were having a hard time getting anyone really qualified for less than 200. We were able to settle on 150. That's more than what I make. Okay, that's good. But I understood the importance, the critical importance of an IT director, a commissioner at that time. And so we transferred money from unused position to increase that salary, but not adding any more expense to the budget. So, unfortunately, some people who don't understand finance, the comptroller constantly tries to scare them and tell them they've added all of these positions. They're giving people huge raises. This is incredible. And this is why the city is broke. But yet, again, her numbers that we showed just a few minutes ago show that through September, $9 million in savings. These are her numbers, not my numbers. These are her numbers. So what she says and the narrative that she has painted totally contradicts the numbers that she finally, through her attorney, provided the city.
And let me say, I think that, and that's why I think that it's very important for us to make sure that we are trying to get as much of the details that we potentially can from the comptroller's office, especially around the revenues, because that will help us to kind of be able to balance what is happening, right? And the mayor talks about the $9 million that is projected budgeted. Surplus, but we also recognize that there also are some deficiencies in the revenues, right? But without having that information in front of us, we can't necessarily speak to it. But we recognize that will charge against that, right? And so at the end of the day, it may even out, but clearly the administration has been trying to balance the budget as best as we possibly can with the information, that we have, right? And so therefore, taking from positions that have been vacant, figure out how do we utilize some of that money, but also how do we project what is going to be saved at the end of the year, because we know that there's going to be a shortfall in various areas of the revenues. And so it's not one of those things that the mayor and the team, we have not had discussion. We're having these discussions almost every day with the commissioners about how can they make sure that they cut costs. I mean, when preparing the budget for 2021, the mayor asked all of the commissioners to look in their budget and look to see if they basically come up with a 10 to 15% decrease. What we understand and know, right? But it's hard to move forward with any projections or completion of the budget if we don't have a clear understanding of what the revenues are, what the actual expenditures are, and if they were appropriately applied. I mean,
it's going to be very important if you're going to prepare a budget. It has to be structurally balanced, and your revenues have to match your expenditures. And you have to get those revenue numbers. And as I said, there's certain revenue numbers that you may be able to get from the state. Okay, like your state aid, you can project that. You can probably ask the departments, like the fire department, about revenues for the permits. Okay, the building department, you may probably get an idea, but you have to be able to match that to see what was projected or what was budgeted for 2020. All right, and what you think may be an actual number, as close as possible. The worst thing to do in preparing a budget is to overestimate your revenues. You always want to underestimate your revenues so that if they come over budget, that's a good thing. And that's how you kind of generate a surplus at the end of the year, right? The surplus is generated when you have more revenues than expenses, and that extra money that comes in as a cushion, that goes to the fund balance every year. So you've got to be very, very careful when you estimate your revenues. It's always better to underestimate them.
Right. Right.
So one of the things also that the comptroller continues to push forward and has since the beginning of the year in her public narrative is she says that the city of Mount Vernon has 212 police officers, 149 DPW workers, 158 firefighters, and over 700 other employees. For the 20 some odd years that you were the comptroller and when you left in 2017, about how many employees do you remember Mount Vernon having?
I think we've had about 700 in total.
About 700 in total,
Mhm,
not
mhm.
1,200.
No,
Malcolm,
no.
can you put up the graphic from the state auditor's report for me, please? So, wow, Maureen, even though you've been gone 3 years, you're pretty much spot on.
No, it's very close to that.
This
Boy.
is the state auditor back in August said that Mount Vernon had 710 budgeted employees. Now that's budgeted employees.
Right.
That doesn't even mean the actual employees with 18 vacancies in fire and 20 in DPW and vacancies all throughout the city. We probably have closer to about 660 employees.
Yeah, we've never had 900 employees.
She said
That
1,200.
number may have included your youth seasonals, the children who come on in the youth program during the
Yes.
summer,
Right.
because sometimes you can hire and Reverend Morton, you would know more about that.
Right.
300 to 400 young
So
people for the summer.
So now, Maureen, we have closer to about 465 young people that we're able to hire in the summer and throughout the year and after school. Those 465 young people should not be counted against the budget because they are not paid by city
By
tax
the
dollars.
correct. I'm
They're
sure you
paid
get
by
grants for
grants.
that. Yeah. I'm sure you
Absolutely.
get grants.
So to mislead the public in believing that we have 1,200 staff um, working for the city and getting nothing done, and that we're just living fat off the tax dollars of Mount Vernon, that's just totally untrue. As the state comptroller's report right here on the screen says, we have 710 budgeted employees. Like I said, we have closer to 650, 660 actual employees. And the difference between what the city comptroller, Deborah Reynolds, reports of 1,200 employees and the 710 that were budgeted are our summer youth and our after school and our year-round youth workers that are paid totally through state, county, and federal grants monies. Again, this need to misguide, misrepresent the state of finances in Mount Vernon. It's just not professional. You have a CPA, and I know in a conversation the other day you said you would never do anything that is going to put your licensing, your certification.
That is so true.
In jeopardy.
Never have done that.
Our current comptroller has no licenses and no certifications to speak of, so I guess she's not concerned about putting those in jeopardy. We had qualified people in her office, like Ashley and Javon, individuals like that, some who were terminated while on maternity leave, incredible. Others who left just because they saw the financial workings in the office, like Jennifer Master Giorgio went over to DPW because professionals do not want to put themselves at risk for doing things that are illegal or unethical. And so we've lost some great talent. We still have talent down there, but unfortunately they're afraid to step forward and do the right thing or say the right thing. I guess one of the last things that I want to talk about is sales tax. So with COVID happening, sales tax has been a big revenue loss around the county, around the country, but we've worked really, really hard to make sure that was just not one more area that we lost revenue in. And so if you look, this comes from the state comptroller's office. Again, the comptroller says that we're really, really short year to date, that we've lost so much money. And that's one of the reasons why we're overspending. Mount Vernon In 2019, year to date, we had collected 20.2. In 2020, even with COVID, we're just 0.3% below, 1.7 below
1.7.
what we'd collected. Then I think we are budgeted for about 22 million. So if we stay on track, okay, Malcolm is doing lots with the technology. Thank you, Malcolm. If we stay on track, Mount Vernon, we should probably get to about 21, 20, well, let's say we will reach almost our budgeted amount.
What was your budgeted amount for 20? What was your budgeted amount for 2020?
Our budgeted amount for 2020, I have to go back and look, but I believe it's about 22 million.
That's pretty good.
About 22 million. So again, we're going to reach our sales tax number or come very close to it.
Yeah, the budgeted amount was 22,125.
Well, 22,125. So if you feel that you're going to come close to that, at least you have sales tax that you can project for 2021. So that's a number you can project.
And one of the things that we did do, we did hire someone in IDA, understanding that with COVID, it was going to be a major challenge, working with the businesses to come into compliance with all the COVID regulations, helping them find monies to operate their business. So we hired Robin Mack, and she's been our Director of Business Development and Business Compliance, and has worked very closely with our business community while they were closed, also in preparing and working with them to go through the phase 1 through 4 reopening and how to manage this COVID environment, which is very new. We were up 12% for the third quarter of the year. We're up 12% for the third quarter. So we've really done a heavy rebound in our taxes. Our tax collections for sales tax in Mount Vernon has rebounded better than every other major city in Westchester.
Yeah, I'm impressed.
That's the level of work that we've put in. And so we definitely are anticipating a good closeout to the year. We know that this is the time that people are doing their holiday spending. We're hoping that last federal COVID relief comes through to help our residents. And so we are comfortable with some of the things that we have done to save money. We are comfortable with some of the ways that we have tried to increase efficiencies here in the city of Mount Vernon, and that we're working with our commissioners to do the work. Our biggest challenge is that our comptroller is not receiving money from taxpayers. She's not receiving money from department heads who are trying to bring in their revenues from permits and other fees. And that's a major challenge, and is not sharing accurate revenue numbers with us year to date or detailed expenditures so that we can reconcile our books. The last thing, and Maureen, I don't want to give you a heart attack, but the city has 39 different bank accounts. We only have viewing access to one. We have no access to View Munis, which is our city's financial management platform. And so again, we are operating the city in the financial blind. We are totally reliant on the information and the numbers that the comptroller gives us. And based on what we have received, we've saved almost $9.5 million through the third quarter. But yet she tells everyone that the city is totally broke. And we have no money. We're operating on fumes. We have 1,200 staff, and that we're bleeding fiscally right now. So it's very hard for us to plan for the future of the city with a partner who holds all the information, and then the information that they release is either inaccurate, deficient, or she lacks the ability to put the proper information together. It's very hard. We're doing the best we can. We will work with our state auditors and with our paid auditors to try and come up with something to move our budget process forward, because my greatest fear is that come January 1st, she's not going to pay anything because we won't be able. She'll say that we don't have a budget, and with a budget, she can't send out tax bills, and without sending out tax bills, no revenue is coming into the city. And we're right now on the financial cliff, and each day I call the state comptroller and say, look, either put Mount Vernon into receivership, which is something that no one would ever ask for.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are financially operating in the blind, then, what's worse than not knowing?
Choice.
We have no choice. I would rather for the New York State Comptroller to come down and take over our finances, or send in a control board, at minimum a control board, because a control board will come in and review and provide oversight. But if the city goes into receivership, or worse, we go into bankruptcy because we just don't know what's going on. I'm really, really concerned. We're concerned, but with that, we're trying to push forward and do the best that we can in our community.
You guys are probably at a point now where you need some intervention. You've got to get some intervention.
We've been begging for intervention.
The three parties have to come together: the city council, the controller, and the mayor. You guys have to come together to the table, because this is about the city. Mm-hmm. And I would hate to see the last 24 years of my hard work in generating surpluses and keeping that city financially stable go up in flames. I've worked so hard to make sure that city was financially stable, that I'd hate to see that, anything other than that. So some intervention needs to happen, right? You need to go forward and prepare a budget with the information you have. Try your best. I know it's difficult because you have no financials. So when it comes to using fund balance, there's no way in which you can say I can use $1 million or $2 million, because you don't know what's the status of the city's finances.
And I know we've gone late, but there are two last issues, and this won't take more than 5 minutes. As the comptroller, you have the right to audit the different departments. The comptroller has audited and requested audits for different departments, like the Urban Renewal Agency, the Water Department, DPW, the Law Department. On March 2nd, she asked the Urban Renewal Agency, she wanted to do an audit of 2016. We gave her about 200 pages of documents saying these are all of our bank records for every month from all of our bank accounts. These are all of our expenditures, thousands of expenditures on Excel sheets. And as the comptroller, you would usually do a sampling of the expenditures.
You do a sampling. You don't have the whereabouts to go into detail. You choose, let's say you choose a few accounts and you do a sample. And for me, I've always done internal audits of the city from the time I took office. Every year I would do 1 or 2 audits, but I would concentrate more on the city departments, not necessarily the IDA nor the urban renewal, because those were 2 other audits that were done independently. They're just components of the city's financials. So I wouldn't really, concern myself that much to do an internal audit of IDA, nor urban renewal, nor the water department. My concentration was more on the departments within the city that affect the financials directly. And as an auditor, you're not really looking for fraud. Okay, especially external auditors. Internal auditors are a little different. But if fraud does come, if you do see it, then you have to go and dig a little deeper. but you don't have the time to do that detail, inspection. You do a sample.
Oh my goodness, I think I just forgot the last question I was going to ask. But I mean, you've given us so much, and I just truly want to say thank you.
You're
Chief,
welcome.
is there any final thoughts or questions that you have?
No, I don't. I mean, well, I don't have any questions. I think you have laid out for us exactly what it is that we are up against and what it is that we're going to need to do. I think we've articulated that we're doing the best that we can to try to get this budget done. It is the mayor's goal that we get it done and get it done as quickly as possible. And so therefore, I mean, we're going to, as you noticed, I was writing down as you were talking, because I want to make sure that when I go back to have conversations with the department heads, that I know exactly what it is that we're going to try to get from them to be able to craft a draft budget for the mayor to present, of course, to the Board of Estimates. And we'll look at those key revenues that we can get from the departments, and we'll get what we can get from the state. And the rest of it, we'll have to try to continue to try to get from the comptroller in order to do that. But at this point, I think we all agree we cannot wait. We cannot wait to do that. So we're going to have to do what we can to kind of move it forward. So thank you.
You guys are so welcome. I still have the city's interests at heart. Okay, so thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Reverend Morton, and to the viewers. Okay, and I just wanted to say to all my friends in Mount Vernon, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah. You guys be blessed and please be safe. Thank you.
And thank you for doing an incredible masterclass on municipal finance.
You're welcome.
And what it looks like to work collaboratively in city government. Thank you again. Blessings to you and your family. Enjoy Georgia. Enjoy your retirement and your family. And like you said at the beginning, you are not looking to run for comptroller.
Not at all.
You are happily retired, living in the state of Georgia. You wish Mount Vernon all the best.
All the best.
But you've done an incredible 24 years here, and that's good enough, and you've moved on. But thank you for coming back and visiting with us, and again, providing a master class, which hopefully has helped to inform the residents about how things should be done, the relationship between the mayor, the comptroller, and the city council, and the way municipal finance should work. God bless you, Maureen.
You're welcome. God bless you guys.
Be well. Good night, everyone. Last thing, please, Mount Vernon, if you are behind in your rent, if you're behind in your mortgage, please reach out to Legal Services of the Hudson Valley and Westchester Residential Opportunities Program. They will help you pay up to 4 months of your mortgage and of your rent. The deadline for the mortgage program with Westchester Residential Opportunities has passed already, but push and try and get your paperwork in today, tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday. Just continue to reach out to them and see if they'll extend the deadline. They want to spend this money. They want to help the community with the foreclosures. The rent deadlines for rent eviction prevention, those deadlines are rolling, but please do not wait until you're in court for eviction to reach out. Do not wait until your house is in foreclosure. Take advantage of this. There are no income guidelines. You just have to show a reduction in your income during this time of COVID. And so many people at all levels of income have been impacted. And the last thing, for those of you, regardless of your income, who have a need for food and nutrition assistance, please come out tomorrow to the Dole Center at 3:30. We will be giving out tens of thousands of pounds of food, fresh produce, canned goods, fresh meat will be available tomorrow at the Dole Center at 3:30. Do not let your pride keep you from taking advantage of resources that are freely available to this community. We want to make sure that our families, our seniors, and our children are fed, especially during this holiday season. We know that everyone is working to expand and extend your resources with all of the bills you have. So please do not let pride keep you from taking advantage of help. We love you, Mount Vernon. God bless you. And again, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year. We appreciate you. We love you. Good night.